A few hours ago, Mexico killed El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel and one of the world's most wanted drug traffickers. As expected, violence has now erupted across Mexico, threatening to spiral into a full-blown war. Now, this is a developing situation. The violence is still spreading across the country. So we're going to get into what we know so far as of 4 p.m. Central Time on Sunday, February 22nd, what to expect in the coming days, and what it would take for the United States to get directly involved. On that note of U.S. involvement, my understanding now from the reporting that I've seen is that the United States provided intelligence support to the Mexican military. There have not been any official statements or any reliable sources, I should say, suggesting that the United States had any more involvement than that. No U.S. aircraft overhead and certainly no U.S. boots on the ground. That's as of reporting right now. Of course, that could change. Now, to give you an idea of how significant this operation was, the Latin Times said, quote, "The killing immediately becomes one of the most consequential blows to a major Mexican criminal organization in years, both because CJNG has been widely described as among the country's most powerful and violent groups, and because El Mencho has remained a fugitive despite a years-long binational manhunt that includes a U.S. State Department reward of up to $15 million for information leading to his arrest or conviction." I don't speak Spanish. I feel like El Mencho is pretty close to what it's supposed to be, but I'm sure I'm getting that wrong in some way, and I'll hear about it in the comments. But that's who we're talking about, El Mencho, the head of CJNG. The Associated Press went into a little more detail here, saying the Mexican army killed the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, El Mencho, on Sunday, decapitating what had become Mexico's most powerful cartel. They say El Mencho was wounded in an operation on Sunday to capture him in Jalisco, and he died while being flown to Mexico City. The state of the base of the cartel is known for trafficking huge quantities of fentanyl and other drugs to the United States, according to the Mexican government. They say during the operation, troops came under fire and killed 4 people. 3 more, including El Mencho, were wounded and later died. 2 were arrested, and they said that armored vehicles, rocket launchers, and other arms were seized, adding that 3 members of the armed forces were wounded and are now receiving medical treatment. As is the case, anytime something happens with the cartels, we've got some old footage popping around the internet showing off some of their armored vehicles. They are more advanced now than they were, and they have a lot of them. So it would have been more surprising had there not been armored vehicles at the site where El Mencho was captured/killed. And this is just something to keep in mind as the violence continues to escalate. This is so much more than, a street gang or a low-level gang. These guys have armored vehicles. They have rocket launchers. They have machine guns. They are not just they have a lot of drones, and that's going to be an interesting one to see how it plays out if this violence continues to spiral. And they're also very well trained. All right, so this is not quite force on force, like equal playing field, but it's much closer to that than it is, say, in the United States, if the U.S. military were to go after a gang somewhere in the U.S., not a fair fight. This is closer to a level playing field in a lot of ways. Now, the Associated Press added that the DEA considers the cartel to be as powerful as the Sinaloa cartel, one of Mexico's most infamous criminal groups with a presence in all 50 U.S. states. They say it is one of the main suppliers of cocaine to the U.S. market, and like the Sinaloa cartel, earns billions from the production of fentanyl and methamphetamines. So, bad dude, bad leader, or, the bad dude was a leader of a bad organization, I think, to say the least, right? Now, in terms of the violence that's spreading, a lot of the videos that you're seeing right now is the result of CJNG attacks across the country. We don't have very much from the actual kill capture mission itself, but the burning vehicles, the roadblocks and such, that is the response from CJNG. El Huaso, a great analyst over on X, whose information will be linked in the description below, put together this graphic saying he is now tracking narco-related violence in 18 states. That's how quickly this started to spiral. In fact, on that note, we'll put a couple different sources in the description for anybody that wants to follow this more up-to-date on Twitter or on Instagram. El Huaso is one. Stefano Rittendale over on All Source News, of course, another great one. We've got Stefano coming on tomorrow, hopefully, to do a little more deeper dive into all of this, so be sure to tune back in for that one. Now, we're seeing a wide range of what these response and attacks look like at this point. In terms of casualty figures, really not clear. I've not seen any viable reporting on that at all. Outside of the Mexican government talking about the results of that raid, everything else is just a mess is probably the best way to put it. Don't have details on military personnel killed. We know some of them have been targeted. Don't have information on additional cartel members killed, and don't have any information on civilians caught in the crossfire. However, there was an unconfirmed report, and we have a couple of these to mention today, that the CJNG is prioritizing going after military personnel, which would not be shocking given the fact that the military just killed their leader. And in one text message, it said that they are offering up to 20,000 pesos for each dead Mexican soldier or member of the Mexican military. Again, unconfirmed text message coming across right now. A lot of what we're seeing in the streets and a lot of the pictures and the videos coming out right now are showing roadblocks, burning vehicles being set up by the cartels. And the idea there is to hinder security force movement into and out of certain areas. There's some locations talking about dozens of these roadblocks happening. In a lot of cases, you got 18-wheelers being drug out in the middle of the road and set ablaze. We've seen countless reports already of shootouts between armed gangs and authorities, maybe some bombings. I did see a picture earlier, or some pictures I'll share here, that was from a National Guard compound. It looked an awful lot like something went boom in there. Haven't heard any reports of those bombings and what they might entail. There were also some reports and some videos suggesting that there were armed gunmen in and around the Guadalajara International Airport, and that's just to kind of say that, like, this is just going everywhere, right? So as soon as El Mencho was killed, everything spiraled. Like, we've got an international airport effectively shut down at this point. I mean, Southwest and Alaska Airlines said that they canceled any flights out of Puerto Vallarta. Delta issued waivers to anybody in and out of Puerto Vallarta or Guadalajara. Like, it wasn't just this one operation. We're seeing areas across Mexico, especially in that general vicinity, shut down. And when you look at the videos coming out right now, it looks like all of the citizens have kind of stayed inside. There's an order to do that from the government, and it sounds like the cartels are also threatening people, saying, stay inside or else. CBS News reports that the Jalisco governor activated a code red, which is protocol for a state of emergency or security crisis in response to the clashes. In a post on X, he said public transportation was suspended across Jalisco and urged people in the area to remain in their homes until the situation was under control. The U.S. State Department also issued a warning for U.S. citizens in a number of different states to shelter in place until further notice. I was mentioning the couple text messages that I cannot personally verify. We'll see if Stefano can maybe talk about this a bit more tomorrow, but I am seeing them reported on what I consider reliable channels. One of them was coming from the CJNG to people in some of these areas, telling them, quote, do not leave your homes. All hell is going to break out because of the filthy government. We have orders to kill anyone who gets in our way, and we don't want to harm the people. Everyone stay in your homes until the situation is under control. Now, I did see, there's been a lot, actually, at this point of misinformation, disinformation spreading around this. A lot of old pictures, some AI already. One of them was showing a burned-out airplane on a tarmac at the Guadalajara International Airport. That doesn't appear to be genuine. Another one was a big account over on Twitter or X said that Americans were being taken hostage because by the cartels, and in a response to U.S. operation that killed El Mencho. Like, nothing in that statement is accurate. The Mexican government is pretty quick to try to bat that down a little bit and say, hey, U.S. forces were not involved, and there are no credible reports right now that the cartels are targeting Americans or that they have captured or abducted any hostages at this point. So just be ready that flow of misinformation is only going to increase. So in terms of what comes next, I think the next 12 to 18 hours are going to be pretty significant here. We're going to find out overnight, or at least get an idea overnight, if this is kind of a short spurt of reactionary violence. And we've seen that before. When major cartel officials have been killed or captured, you see responses, right? They take to the streets to show that they're still in control of certain areas. Is that what's happening here, or is this kind of the start of what genuinely could lead into a form of civil war? Another big question is going to be whether or not the government, which is mobilizing resources now, from what we can tell, is the government going to be able to mobilize enough and in the right area to actually quash the violence? Do they still have control, or is this the kind of thing that will essentially show the world that they do not have control? More middle to long-term predictions here. The Latin Times says, quote, one short-term consequence is volatility. research on cartel fragmentation in Mexico's kingpin era has repeatedly found that removing a top leader can produce splintering, contested leadership, and new local wars as factions fight over revenue streams and routes. They say another impact is the broader rivalry map. If CJNG's internal leadership becomes contested, rivals could attempt to seize territory or trafficking corridors, especially in hotspots where CJNG already faces entrenched enemies. Conversely, if CJNG's next leadership consolidates quickly, the cartel may seek to demonstrate strength through retaliation, roadblocks, and intimidation, tactics already reported around this operation. And I've already seen a lot of folks ask the question of U.S. involvement, and are we getting ready to step in and help quell this violence? So a couple thoughts on that. No, I don't think the U.S. is anywhere close to going into Mexico to help put down the violence as it stands today. Maybe if it continues to spread, I think we are it is hard for me to envision a scenario where the United States puts boots on the ground in Mexico simply to help Mexico stabilize internally. There would have to be some sort of direct threat to the United States. So if the violence were to spread, and right now it doesn't look like there's any violence at or around border checkpoints. It sounds like traffic is still flowing there. If the violence were to spread into the United States, that would be a different story. We do know CJNG, as well as any number of Mexican cartels, have a presence in the United States. They have been violent at times, not to the level that we're seeing in Mexico right now. If that were to happen here, then we would probably see a U.S. crackdown locally. So if it happened in Phoenix, you'd see a crackdown in Phoenix. I don't know that that would necessarily translate to a U.S. operation in Mexico to go after their leadership. So possible, but I do think that's quite a ways away. And but if the Mexican government is not able to establish any sort of control, and we see the cartels take over more and more control, not just of certain areas, but airports are shut down, if it starts to impact border crossings, and genuinely, like right now, we're seeing entire cities shut down due to the risk and the escalation of violence. If that continues, it's entirely possible that the Mexican government reaches out asking for assistance from the United States and maybe others. In that case, we might see the United States do more, to include even putting boots on the ground in Mexico. But I do think that's quite a ways away. The big thing to watch right now is the spiral of violence. Is the state going to be able to regain control and kind of tamp this down? Or are we watching the first few hours of what could be the most violent episode in Mexico's history getting ready to play out? But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.